The idea of the church rooted in the life of Jesus himself as the truth of which both the Jewish temple and the pagan temples were, in the last analysis, pointers or parodies. But if heaven and earth are joined together in Jesus, in his resurrection, the other thing to remember about heaven, which mostly when people think about the ascension they forget, is that in biblical theology, heaven is the control room for earth. Heaven is not a detached place where somebody goes in order precisely not to have anything to do with earth. If you read the book of Daniel, and Daniel is very significant for the whole theology of the ascension, as we'll see in a moment, the point again and again is, there is a God in heaven, therefore you, Nebuchadnezzar or Darius or whoever you are, better watch out, because he's actually in charge, and you'll be finding that pretty soon. Heaven is the control room for earth. Today we are faced in our late modern, postmodern world with the false antithesis, let me say this in technical jargon and then unpack it, with the false antithesis of deism or theocracy. The deism of the Enlightenment, the Epicureanism, which says basically God's upstairs, he's a long way away, religion is about how we in private get in touch with this distant God, but it's got nothing whatever to do with the real world. Your country, in a measure, is built on that dogma. Very explicitly. Late 18th century deism, Epicureanism. Or, today, we see types of theocracy. We see in Islamic fundamentalism a sense that if God is God, we're just going to smash you. We're going to defeat you. We're going to blast you into smithereens. And our world says, no, no, no. If that's what having a God who's running the show here looks like, we don't want that. We'll go back to deism, thank you very much. Right now in my country, even though we have an established church, actually our worldview is pretty similar to yours in terms of deism. In my country and in yours, we have people saying God must at all costs be kept out of public life. Got to be kept away from the public square. Because that way lies danger. The danger of a tyrannous theocracy. But the point of the ascension and all that flows from it in the book of Acts is to say that the word theocracy changes according to which theos you believe in. If you believe in a big, bad, bullying God who's out to get you and smash you and squash you to fit his preconceived notions, as it were, then of course theocracy will be unpleasant. But supposing you believe in the God revealed in Jesus of Nazareth, theocracy might look very different. The kingdom of God is theocracy. And the whole point of Jesus' mission and ministry, all those parables, and all those feastings and healings and work with the poor and so on, was to say, this is what it looks like when God is running the show. It's not that nasty, hateful theocracy which would come and bully you and make you cringe and diminish you. It's a theocracy where the genuine, generous God comes to fill his creation with new love and life and hope. That's what the book of Acts is all about. I sometimes say, to jolt people into thinking about the kingdom of God, I sometimes do this with youth groups. They come in and, the bishop's going to speak to you. And I come and say, what would it look like if God was running this show? So people say, well, we'd have better coffee for a start. Fine, okay. So actually, that's what Jesus was talking about. Jesus was going around saying, what would it look like if God was in charge here? Say, I'll show you. Here's a leper, gets healed. Here's somebody who's been out in the wilderness, gets brought, all that stuff. And then he explains, this is what it looks like when God's running the show. Acts is saying, you will be my witnesses. You will go and show people as well as tell them what it's like when God, the true God, is running the show. The ascension, in other words, is the correlate of the worldwide mission of the church, or more exactly, worldwide mission is what follows from the ascension. Because once Jesus is raised to heaven, he is in charge and sends people to implement his work and his will. And that's why, verse 11, the second coming is the moment when heaven and earth finally come together. And again, if you've read Surprised by Hope, you'll have heard me talk about this at some length. So much of the Western tradition has got the second coming wrong. He's coming back to take us home. No, he isn't. He's coming back to establish his rule and his reign by transforming this world and our bodies to be like his glorious body. Philippians 3:20 and 21, and by a curious convenience, Acts 3:20 and 21 as well. Times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord, and he will send you the Messiah, appointed for you, that is Jesus, who must remain in heaven until the time of universal restoration that God announced long ago through his holy prophets. The point of the second coming is not to take people away from the earth, but to establish God's kingdom on the earth. To bring the last scene in the Bible, Revelation 21, is not about people going up to heaven. It's about the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven to earth. It's the ultimate denial of all Gnosticism. And since post-Enlightenment Western civilization has been deeply Gnostic in so many ways, the church has gone along for the ride and has robbed itself not only of one of its key theological emphases, but, as we shall see, one of its key cultural and political emphases as well. What would somebody in the ancient world have thought reading Acts 1:1 to 11? An ancient Jew of the first century would have known Daniel 7. Josephus tells us that in the middle of the century, one of the things that drove them to revolt against Rome was a text in their scriptures which said that at that time a world ruler would emerge from Judea. And if you've read the New Testament of the people of God, pages whatever it is, 300 and something, you will know that the key text in the book of Daniel is a combination of Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, which give you, and Daniel 9, which give you a time frame, which give you a world ruler, which give you a Jewish king who becomes sovereign over the world. And how does that happen? One like a son of man comes upward. The coming of the Son of Man is going up, not down. I once said that in a lecture in Regent College, Vancouver, and a young Baptist came up to me afterwards and said, listen, in my Bible it says he's coming. You just said he's going, and I think he's coming. I said, I'm sorry, the Greek is a komenon, which could mean coming or going. And he said, well, now I don't know whether I'm coming or going. And I said, fine, okay, I understand that. In Daniel, the movement is upwards. It's the Son of Man coming to the Ancient of Days, coming, being exalted to heaven. When a Jew would read Acts 1:1 to 11, a Jew aware of Daniel would say, this is the moment when God's sovereignty is being exercised through his anointed king, when the nations are going to find out who runs this world after all. What would an ancient Roman think about a king going up to heaven? Easy. This is apotheosis. If you've been to Rome and up at the far end of the Forum, the top end of the Forum, you see the Arch of Titus, wonderful great arch. And if you stand under the arch and look up, there's a carving of the Emperor Titus being turned into a god at his death. His soul, a little bird-like thing, is being taken up to heaven. Now, of course, the ascension of Jesus is not like the ascension of the soul of a Roman emperor. They used to do this, when an emperor died, they had the funeral pyre, and there was a slave who was bribed or threatened or whatever, who had to swear on oath that he had seen the emperor's soul ascending to heaven, and that was the kind of official mechanism whereby they said, right, that proves he has been divinized. Sometimes they didn't do that when the emperor had been scorned and scoffed at. You may know that when Claudius died, Seneca, who was the great philosopher and was the tutor to Nero, who succeeded Claudius, wanted to scoff at Claudius in order to say what a great man Nero was instead. And so instead of the divinization of Claudius, Seneca wrote a whole satirical book on how instead of being turned into a god, Claudius had been turned into a pumpkin. The apokolokintosis of Claudius instead of the theosis, the pumpkinification of Claudius. But anyway, so the idea of divinization, they knew about this stuff. It meant you went up and you became divine and you deserved worship. And you were now part of the pantheon of the gods who are running the world. So that though, of course, Luke is not writing Acts in order to say that Jesus is just like that. But if you were an ancient Roman reading this, and ancient Romans would have read this, some of them, then you might have thought, maybe this is the reality of which the Caesar cult is simply a ghastly, distorted parody. And when you think of the purpose of Acts, think of those great two sections, Acts 1 to 12, Jesus is the Messiah of Israel. How does that end? It ends with the present king of the Jews, the Herod of the day, taking up arms against the church and then himself coming to a bad end. But the second half, 13 to 28, is the gospel going out into Caesar's world. And as we'll see tomorrow or possibly the next day, depending on how fast we go, it's tantalizing at the end of Acts. We want to know what happens at the end when Paul gets there. And all we're told is Paul ends up in Rome preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ and talking about the kingdom of God openly and unhindered, right under Caesar's nose. Because Jesus is Lord and Caesar isn't. This is the point of the book of Acts. Already we should get it. Temple, culture, politics. Main themes, the worship and the lordship of Jesus. And therefore in Acts chapter 2, I'm going rather fast because my watch has gone quicker through this than I thought it would. In Acts chapter 2, I just want to suggest this, and this is going to be the foundation for what I'm going to get to tomorrow. In Acts chapter 2, the story of Pentecost. Again, I won't ask you what you preach about at Pentecost. There are 1,000 sermons you can preach about here. But if you come to Acts 2 with that theological understanding of what's going on in Acts 1, this is how heaven and earth have been brought together. These are the people who are going to be the ones through whom God's glory will go out into all the world. Then it seems to me we ought to read the story of Pentecost with this rushing mighty wind filling the house and the fire and the wind filling the disciples, as itself a counter-temple statement. This is like the scene in Isaiah 6 when the glory of the Lord fills the house. Only now it's happening to these people, and it is equipping them to be the means of God's glory going out into the world. You know, Paul in Colossians 1 has that wonderful phrase, Colossians 1:27, when he says, to me it has been given this extraordinary gift to make known to the Gentiles the secret which God had hidden for ages, which is now revealed, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. And we in the Western world have shrunk that. We've turned it inwards. You know, Christ in me so that I will be glorified. Christ in you, singular, so that you will be glorified. And then if we're clever, we notice actually the Greek is plural. Christos en humin. It's not en soi. It's in you, plural, the hope of glory. But whose glory is it? Yes, it's our glory in a sense. The glory of God in and for us. But I think in the light of Colossians 1, I haven't got time to do a whole exposition of Colossians 1 tonight, it's bigger than that again, because Colossians 1:15 through 20, as you know, is all about the cosmic vision. In him and through him and for him, all things in heaven and on earth were created. In him and through him and for him, all things in heaven and earth were reconciled, making peace by the blood of his cross. Is God going to step back from that vision and say, well, that was a nice idea, but actually creation, well, we can leave that and we'll just have human beings all by their little selves? No. Christ in you, the hope of glory. The ecclesiology of Colossians, and I think of Ephesians, includes this idea that when the church goes out into the world, bearing Christ in the power of the Spirit, this is the sign to the world already of that filling, that flooding with the glory of God, of which Isaiah and Habakkuk had spoken. The earth shall be full of the glory of God as the waters cover the sea. And the life and witness and mission of the church is the sign already of how that happens, that wherever the people of God are, there in that place, there in Durham, there in Malibu, there in Iceland and in South America and Southeast Asia, Africa, everywhere, there is already Christ in you, the hope of that glory. That is what I think Acts is all about. And that's why, as we go through, the church is a counter-temple movement, and the church is the movement which hails Jesus as Lord, and so runs into trouble with other people who think that they are running the show. And in between worship and sovereignty, we have the whole question of human culture. And what we're going to see, God willing, over the next 36 hours or so, is at least some little pinpricks of how the early church navigated those particular challenges, which may, I hope, generate some reflections on how we do as well.